I'm going to run through really quickly to tell you a tiny bit about the charity, and then more importantly about the 2 partnerships we've been developing with clinicians and researchers. So we're very new. We started in September 2020. We launched as a charity. We're entirely volunteer run. The 9 founder members, we all have had a lobular breast cancer diagnosis. As it was the pandemic, we decided to actually not launch officially until September 2021. Anybody who's ever thinking of launching a charity in a pandemic, don't do it. Stupid thing to try and do. So we're really young. We're not even a year old officially in the public eye. And we have a scientific and medical advisory board which help us because we wanted to make sure we were kind of scientifically proven driven. We've got 2 of our SMAG, not a great acronym, board here today, which is Val Brunton and Ali Sawyer are here. And there's kind of 4 key things we aim to do. One of them is kind of reduce patient isolation. The one thing we all said was we felt really isolated. Not only had we had a breast cancer diagnosis, we were then told it was called something that none of us could remember. We were calling it globular and ovular before we realised it was actually lobular. We also look at education and information, a key element of lobular breast cancer. We do research and working with partners and also looking at funding research, and we advocate for better kind of research and treatments. So one of the partnerships we've done is we wanted to talk about was building with University of Edinburgh. And this was before I'd even set LBC UK up with the amazing women I work with. And I just did the thing we're not meant to do, and I Googled who is doing lobular research and found Dr. Andy Sims, who sadly is no longer with us. I think many of you know him, an amazing man, and Val Brunton, and just wrote to them and said, look, we're interested in setting up a charity. Could we possibly work with you? And we were invited up. It was when they were running the Edinburgh Breast Cancer Special Symposium, and we were invited up to go and visit the lab up in Edinburgh. And we had half a day before the symposium. One of the things that Steffi was mentioned, they paid for our travel, they paid for our accommodation, they took us to the dinner, and they took us around the lab. We met some of the young researchers who are also here today. They talked to us about their research. We got to understand about research, but also they got to meet lobular patients for the very first time. They'd never met anyone with a lobular diagnosis. And we also shared our aims about setting up the charity. And one of the great things I mentioned before was that Esme now is our go-to for lay summaries, which has been really helpful for people understanding. It's now progressed from that initial meeting that we did pre-COVID into we're running a first pilot research partnership day. And we hope to emulate these with other institutions across the UK. And we've got a lab visit. We're going to be sharing what we're doing at LBC UK. We've got 9 patients who are interested in becoming patient advocates who had to apply, because the one thing we wanted to make sure that people were coming because they wanted to be an advocate rather than kind of mistakenly thinking it was about finding out about their own disease or condition. Edinburgh are going to be sharing the research we're going to be doing, but I think the most important bit is going to be the conversation we have afterwards. How do we want to work together? How do we get patient advocates more involved in research? And how research can be based more on lived experience of patients? And then looking at next steps for developing the partnership. So I'd love to see this as a pilot that we then start looking at developing with other institutions across the UK, and happy to share with anyone how the day's gone. Another partnership that we've developed, we're really lucky that one of our founder members, Helen Coulthard, is a health psychologist at De Montfort University. And one of the things that's very much come out talking with patients is the psychological impact that doesn't seem to be being researched on patients of having a lobular diagnosis. So we've been working with some of Helen's colleagues, and we started off initially, we did just 3 simple PPI workshops because we wanted to make sure at the charity that it wasn't just us 9 saying this is what we need to do, that it was a broader spectrum of patients to plan what we were doing for the charity. From that, we've gone to a co-design postcards, and we're creating 4 really simple postcards that we'll be sending to clinicians to ask, is this okay? Is this scientifically relevant? And it's what patients wanted, some really simple, easily transferable information. And it's been facilitated facilitated by health psychologists as well, which has really provided support for the patients and taking care of the patients in the process of the co-design. And the postcards will literally be two sides. It's useful to know, and it's okay to ask, that people can use with their surgeon, with their oncologist, with their primary care practitioners. And from that, we've carried on working with De Montfort as well, and we've done 2 studies very much based on patient experiences. The first is kind of an MA student, Victoria Rake, and she's been exploring the impact on patients of having lobular mist on mammogram, and that's an ongoing study that's still happening at the moment, and another PhD student, Ben Lond, is picking that up. And then you'll see upstairs we've got our first LBC UK poster, which and that's been through a Delphi study, which is kind of an iterative process of we asked 50-odd patients a certain amount, do you agree or not agree? And then from that initial round, we then define that into kind of, I think, another set of questions based on those that the most people agreed on, and then we came down to the consensus in the study. And it's very much seen that there needs to be a different standard of care for looking after lobular patients because of the experiences of mis-screening, potential fear of long-term diagnosis. So that's just a quick example of kind of some of the ways as a patient advocacy organisation we're working with researchers and clinicians. And I just wanted to kind of quick recommendations. Quote from Esme about how important it is for early career researchers to meet patients. It's okay to start small. Simply find out who your researchers and clinicians are interested in lobular, send them an email, but be really clear about how you'd like to work with them. They're busy people. Learn about each other and other skills and how you can contribute and collaborate together. One of the really simple things we did was actually we recorded Zoom sessions, not complex technology, with breast care nurses and with a consultant radiologist, and work with people and collaborate. So, for example, we're trying to work with Breast Cancer Now, who were initially said we just don't have the capacity, but we're now listed on Breast Cancer Now's website, and they're about to do a Facebook Live on us. So just a quick thank you. Sorry, just for everyone to see. Big thank you to everyone, and thank you particularly for everyone who's kind of put so much time into running the conference.
So I'm Laurie Hutcheson, and I've been the Executive Director of the Lobular Breast Cancer Alliance for the past couple of years, following in the footsteps and mentored supremely by Steffi and Lee. I hope that I've done the great foundation of this organization justice in taking it to be an independent public charity now that's funding ILC research and a number of other things. And continuing, I hope, to be a resource internationally and nationally. And one of those things that I want a brief commercial about is we have flyers as well similar to the leaflet, which we also have on the LBCA website. There are a lot of, this flyer is about lobular breast cancer on one side and our organization on the other. It's downloadable. One of the things I noticed recently is that oncologists don't want paper in their offices, so we do try to get the word out about all the resources across the globe, really, on lobular. So, and we do know that patient advocates and patients and their family members do find their way to our respective websites and the private patient Facebook groups. And that's really in the past few years. And anyway, very excited that it continues to expand and we continue to get the word out. And I also want to say that we have some pens on the table, and they really do work. You have to force them. Next slide, please. So I do want to talk specifically about how LBCA is supporting patient advocacy and research collaboration. And I also want to thank my colleagues from ELBCC and Lobster Pot for organizing this again, and for this being the first in-person since 2016, which is really incredible. And I do want to know how many patient advocates are here. Can you just raise your hand? Yeah, this is really great. And how many clinician researchers are here this morning? Awesome. And are any of you both patient advocates and clinician researchers? We do have some, I know, on our board. Great. So I want to share a couple of points about LBCA. We were founded, as you know, by patient advocates and researchers collaborating after the 2016 Symposium. And as I said, we're now independent, and we are run by a handful of staff, but a sort of an army of volunteers. And we exist to raise awareness about invasive lobular carcinoma, to provide resources for patients with ILC worldwide and their families, to support education and research advocacy, and to promote and now fund ILC research. Through resources and activities that we put on and are expanding, such as our virtual advocate chats, we strive to assist individuals with ILC to become effective patient advocates, whether it's education advocacy or research advocacy. Next slide, thanks. Also on our website is the LBCA Advocacy Toolkit, which is really a section devoted to helping people go there and learn and download tools and read information about education advocacy and research advocacy. We also include suggestions and tips for how to, if you're inspired by a researcher that you've read about or that you know, how you can reach out to them, how you can start to talk with them, maybe tour their lab, start a collaboration, and then maybe in the future they might use you in developing their research. How to find local patient advocate groups near you. And the tips that we're providing, I think, are generalizable across the globe. It's really about, having some confidence to say, I have something to offer. I'm a patient advocate, and actually you should listen to me. And in designing your research, it's helpful to have patient advocates provide a perspective of, maybe if you add 1 more month to survival, that's not the best aim for this research. So we provide some tools for people to develop the confidence and also to just think about how they can go out and influence more lobular research. We also provide information about how to find research application review opportunities. I don't know how many of them there are in Europe, but in the US, the National Institutes for Health and NCI have opportunities, and then there are cancer institutes that also have grant review opportunities, and more, and I know there are pharmaceutical funded research, but they require patient advocate participation. And that's something that, as an advocate organization, we've been pushing for in all realms, really, the importance of including patient advocates in research. We also provide lists of research training programs and mechanisms for joining the LBCA Patient Advocate Registry, because sometimes researchers don't know if they are obliged to include a patient advocate in the research. How am I going to find someone? So we've been developing an ILC Patient Advocate Registry, and we're also trying to develop a registry of trained patient research advocates who can mentor others. And we are growing this on a regular basis. And I know that when we hear from some of our grantees, they'll talk about how they used our resource to find a patient advocate for their research. I also want to note that, one of our patient advocates started to use our resources. And I said, just, reach out to the scientist near you, who was Matt Sikora, and the patient advocates on our board. And I said, just get to know him, go tour his lab. And they developed a relationship, and 2 weeks ago, they put on a little mini ILC symposium session in Colorado in that medical center, and they recorded it. So there's a lot that can be developed from these relationships. In 2021, LBCA started to fund ILC research grants, and we issued 3 jointly, 2 with ASCO Conquer Cancer Foundation and 1 with AACR. And we provide tips in our grant application solicitation with these entities for how researchers can work with patient advocates. These include talking with your patient advocates about determining the successful completion of the project and what that will mean for clinical research going forward, and creating effective lay summaries, and ultimately creating effective summaries of the research findings. And we require grant applicants to describe how they will work with patient advocates in their applications, and that's part of what's going to be scored. So these are the requirements in the ILC research grant solicitations that we've developed. The process must include patient advocate assistance in developing the lay summaries, the letter of intent. You need to have a letter of recommendation from a patient advocate. And in that letter of recommendation, they need to describe genuinely how the researcher they're working with intends to use them from the beginning of the research design through implementation. And it doesn't have to be the same patient advocate, but that has to be a part of the application. And I should note that in working with the American Academy for Cancer Research, we required that patient advocates be a part of the review committee and a voting part, not just say something about the research. And they pushed back initially and said, we've not done that before. And since they have with us, they have said they're making that a practice for all of their cancer studies going forward. So we've made a little headway there. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our 3 ILC grantees who you met yesterday. Our 2021 ASCO Conquer Cancer LBCA Young Investigator Award for Invasive Lobular Carcinoma Research, Dr. David Lim from Women's College Hospital, Toronto. The 2021 AACR Lobular Breast Cancer Alliance Invasive Lobular Carcinoma Research Fellowship grantee, Dr. Candice Frerick from Texas, and the 2022 Conquer Cancer LBCA Young Investigator Award for Invasive Lobular Carcinoma Research grantee, Dr. Karen Von Balen, our newest, and they're all in various stages of their research. And what I'd like, I'm going to sit down and bring the mic over, and I'd like you each to share a bit about how you found an advocate to work with and how you developed the research with advocate input. And if you're finishing up, how you're intending to use research advocates to help with implementation, either the implementation or the findings. And I'm going to bring the mic over.
Well, for me, there's actually 2 sides of working with patient advocates. One of them is through the ELBCC, and Claire, Chauvin, Gabrielle Tone, and Rian, who couldn't be here, they provided me with the letter of support for the grant, talking about how we work together in ELBCC and how the research can move on. And then also for the Uptider project, we work together with patient groups from KU Leuven, UZ Leuven, to see how we can bring this topic to the patients because it's a very delicate topic to discuss with patients. So they advised us on how we can speak to the patients, when we should speak to the patients. Also for the leaflet, they helped us a lot. And then actually the patients that were involved in the study and the families that were involved also helped us by an article in a newspaper, a high-end newspaper in Belgium. And actually that led to also the inclusion of patients that are followed in other hospitals that just come one time to UZ Leuven, so that we can have more inclusions in the autopsy study. And they will help us also to bring the results of the study to the public to see how we can speak.
So I actually met my patient advocate through applying for this fellowship. So I'm a classically trained PhD, never interacted with a patient before. And so it was a new experience for me. She helped me with my lay summary, and we have regular meetings throughout, and hopefully at the end of the day, we'll be able to talk about, if this is going to have an impact, how can we improve our research in the future?
So like I said yesterday, I found my patient advocate through the Alliance, which I think was very important, very practical. On the flip side, I do have a lot of patients with lobular breast cancer, but everybody is different in how they want to give back. And some are still dealing with their diagnosis and treatment, but I find the patient advocates that we are connected to through the Alliance, they want to give back, they want to contribute, and they're very eager. And that's how I met Christine, who was not treated in Toronto, but in Ottawa. So she was treated by my colleagues who I know well. So she was very eager. She's very well read. So she contributed a lot to the proposal. She contributed quite some research questions. Some we were able to answer, and some we weren't able to. And she would ultimately was a part of the data analysis team, and I think that's really important. A lot of my colleagues in other areas of cancer research have involved patient advocates as well, and I think we'll be seeing more and more of that, and it's specifically explicitly stated now in some papers, a patient advocate was part of the development of the research protocol, they were part of the data analysis, and I think that really adds a lot to the translation of the data. And then I know in my own practice going forward, I plan to involve patient advocates in the development of the studies. And I think Steffi made an important point about patient remuneration as well, and which is not often addressed, but I think should be. And definitely in my own applications for research funding going forward, I plan to include that as part of the proposal.